Hi, I'm the Rifter, and this is my photography tutorial. Well, my photography series tutorial. I probably could cover everything in one video, but there's only so much you people can deal with of my face. So, I'm doing you a favor by breaking this up into smaller chunks. This is just an introduction to cameras. We're all adults here. Well, I would assume we're all adults. I don't think there's any children watching my channel. If there are, God help them. So I'll first start out with different types of cameras. You've got large format cameras, which I don't have one because I'm not a millionaire. Medium format cameras, again, I don't have one because I'm not 1,000 air. I'm barely 100 air. Then you have your SLR cameras. This is an SLR camera. It is a single lens reflex. It is a digital single lens reflex, and I'll get into what that means in a minute. You also have your rangefinder cameras, which, just like this, except you have a little window right here, and that's what you actually look through to frame your shots, and then your lens will take the photo. Which, I guess the best example of that would be the disposable cameras at Walmart you used to buy. You would actually look through the little square on the side, and then you would have the center lens that actually takes your photo, and you have to line it up properly to actually get what you want in the photo. There's also another type of camera. It's a mirrorless camera. I so badly want to switch to a mirrorless camera. I wanted to try one. I've been using single lens reflex for years. Probably over a decade. First and foremost, probably the most important part, which it's digital, so every part's important. If it was just a film camera, your lens is probably one of the most important parts. You don't have good glass, which if you're ever talking to a photographer and they talk about glass, they're talking about the lens. It's like, yeah, you gotta have good glass. They're talking about the lens. See right through it. It's got elements, it's got a focus ring, and then you actually have your zoom. This one actually has image stabilization, which basically it is on a system of gyroscopes pretty much. So if you make small movements, it will help keep the image steady while you're being a complete spaz with your camera. This also has a manual focus switch on it if you want to manually focus something. A reason you would want to do that is, let's say you are taking a macro shot. Macro is just a fancy word for close up if you don't know. This is a photography tutorial. I'm gonna treat you like you're stupid because that's just what I do. That's kind of my thing. Your autofocus on these cameras sometimes doesn't work extremely well. I shoot Canon, I have for a while. I am making the switch to Sony soon. But let's say you're taking a macro shot of a bug on a plant for whatever reason, and your autofocus keeps going past the bug, or before it, or past it, or before it. And anybody who's tried to take a picture and that's happened to them, you know exactly what I mean. Manual focus, you'll flip the switch, and then you can adjust the focus manually. And then when you press your shutter button halfway down, it's not going to try to automatically focus for you. It's a lifesaver sometimes. Or not really a lifesaver, but a time saver for sure. And when you're talking about photography, it is all about timing. You can be the worst photographer in the world, but as long as you're in the right place at the right time, you can still get a great shot. Inside your lens, you've got something called an aperture. Aperture is a fancy word for opening. Why they didn't just call it opening, I don't know. They wanted to make it sound fancy, I guess. See that right in front of the camera? That is your aperture at work. So what that does is when you are shooting let's say you have one object here and one object here, really close to your camera. If you want to get them both in focus, you have to use a higher number, which it may be displayed in your camera as f/22. That is a very small aperture. That is going to bring more in focus from the camera to you. The smaller the number, the bigger the hole. And if you really want to get into the confusing math, basically you take the focal length of your lens, which this is an 18 to 55. So I'm at 18 millimeters right now. You take 18 millimeters and divide that by 22. You will have the amount of square millimeters in that tiny opening. f/22, that is your focal length divided by 22, and it gives you the opening. Not super important for you to know that, but sometimes it helps. Also, you can use it to cut light. So not just your shutter, but you can use it to cut light. If you're using flash photography, that's the only way you can cut light, aside from dialing your flash exposure back. That's kind of getting into things a little too deep for what we're trying to do in this video, but just know that you can cut light and you can adjust your depth of field. And again, that's from you, well, it's from the end of your camera lens to your subject, or infinity. Also inside your lens, you have your lens elements. It's several different glass lenses, or God forbid plastic ones. Plastic sucks. Again, you have your focus ring, which I already showed you that, and then your image stabilization. Next section, this whole thing right here, this is the body of your camera. Seems kind of self-explanatory. You'd be really surprised. This little button is your shutter button. Press it down, it takes a picture. Imagine that. Most of you are already familiar with that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. This right here, this is your control dial. And what that does, that lets you select program, aperture priority, shutter priority, and manual modes. This camera's got something called ADEP, which I think it stands for Advanced Depth of Field, but basically you can line up the sensors in the camera where it will automatically adjust the depth of field. I haven't had great luck with it on this camera, so I do it manually, which if you keep following this series, hopefully you will be able to do that if you understand it. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. I'm going to treat you like an idiot. I don't know why, I'm just hard to get along with. Here is the rest of your control dials. Every camera is going to be different. You've got your menu selection buttons. This pretty much functions as enter. That little play button is to review your photos. That one I just took of my camera. Trash button to delete photos. Exposure adjustment. The menu button, which, believe it or not, you get into the menu and then display, turn your display on and off. And I didn't know that the camera was going to pick that up, but that little flash right there, that is an infrared beam. If you cover that up, it shuts your screen off to save power. So, like if I put my face up to the camera, it is going to shut that off to save my camera's battery. It's a nice feature. You've also got a diopter adjustment, that little wheel right there. That's actually for inside your viewfinder. So let's say you've got real crap eyesight like me and everything looks blurry through there still. You can actually adjust that and it will do micro adjustments to this lens in here. And it will help you get it sharp and in focus. So if you do have to focus manually, you actually know when it's in focus, other than the camera telling you, hey, it's in focus with that little beep. Because you're not always going to use the beep. If you're doing wildlife photography, the beep is kind of distracting for the animals, and I'm sure you don't want a bear mauling you because your little camera went beep. And then what actually makes this thing work, light travels through your lens to your mirror inside there, and then it reflects up into a pentaprism. Penta is just a fancy prefix for 5, if you didn't know. and then it reflects it back into your eye through the viewfinder. And after that, there's one other piece that we need to go over, and I have to bring it up on a certain setting to actually show you what it is. Inside your camera, it's no form of magic, depending on who you talk to. Sensor. There we go. You can kind of see it shiny in there. There's the mirror. There's the sensor with my ugly face on it. This is what captures your light. It acts as the same thing as film in a normal camera. So basically, that is what records your image. External accessories, which this is your strap. You can use a neck strap. My preference is a strap that goes over your shoulder, under your arm, goes across your body, and then you can just raise up, snap photos, put your lens cap back on, and then put it back down by your side and walk around. I don't have one of those right now. I really wish I did. There's another one. It is a wrist strap, which highly recommend getting one. You can hang it off of this side of your camera. This camera doesn't really have a bottom strap here, but it's really good because it just comes off of this one, attaches to a bottom one, and it just sticks to your hand or in your wrist, so you can just walk around and let the camera hang. So basically, looks like this. And then you can just grab a hold of your camera and go. But those two are my favorite. I'm not a huge fan of the neck strap, but just about everyone comes with it. Lottie frickin' da. So another thing, on lenses, most of you probably are not, like if you get an SLR or a mirrorless camera, most of you are not going to be fortunate enough to get a full-size sensor. This has an APS-C size sensor, which is much smaller than a full frame camera. Sorry, they call them full frame sensors. What that is, on your 35mm film, it is, believe it or not, 35mm. So, on a digital camera, the sensor inside is 35mm. So, it is a full sensor. It's the exact same size as that film. On APS-C sized cameras, it is much smaller. It's like a 22. I would have to look up the exact specs on it. I don't memorize it because it doesn't matter. What I do memorize is that on Canon cameras, when you shoot an APS-C size sensor, there is a crop factor. And what that is that I'm shooting at 18mm. On Canon, you actually multiply 18 by 1.6, and that will give you what focal length you're actually shooting at. That's what you can actually see in your image once you take the photo. Nikon's got 1.5, and there may be another brand. Most of them are 1.5, but another brand may have another crop factor, which that's not really that important. The other accessory that you can have on the outside is a flash unit, and there's an external flash that you can put in this hot shoe, which that's what that is called, a hot shoe. This one has an onboard flash, which I hardly ever use. Direct flash off of a camera is the worst possible thing you can do unless you just are recording for evidence, pretty much. It's basically going to hit the people right in the face. Could create like these nice dark shadows that I have on my eyes. It could create that. It's going to get a really thick shadow outline on whatever's behind them. So it's not always the best solution. If you're out in an open field, you're pretty much going to get a cardboard cutout of them in around black. But what you really want to do is get an external flash. And if you want to attach to your camera, point it up and then get a white card and reflect it towards your subject, because it will diffuse the light and all the edges will be soft. Trust me, it is so much nicer than having that nasty cardboard cutout look. You've also got different accessories you can use for photography without flashes. You can use reflectors, which I don't have a reflector near me, but you've always seen those big white circles that are like huge. And people are always holding them up to people. That just helps get more natural white light on their face. Is a great thing for portrait photos. If you don't have a flash unit, you can at least throw white light up on somebody's face to get their eyes in focus. Always get somebody's eyes in focus, because if you don't, and you can't really figure out why your photo looks like crap, that's exactly why, is because the eyes are not in focus. You've also got tripods. Believe it or not, tripods aren't so you can still hold on to your beer and you just want to take a selfie with it. That's not what tripods were made for. Tripods were actually made for if you want to keep your camera steady, like you're taking landscape or you're taking low light photos or you're doing astrophotography. They were made to keep your camera steady, because the longer this lens is and the more you hold it, this is where everything is focusing inside your camera. So the more you shake it and the larger this lens is, or the longer this lens is, the more you're going to notice shake. It's just like if you like vehicles, larger wheels are going to, I don't want to say go faster, but that's pretty much what it is. A larger wheel, let's say you've got a 2-foot circumference, if it rolls around once, you will go 2 feet. A smaller wheel that has a 1-foot circumference, you roll it around once on the same wheel, you're going to get 1 foot. Basically, same thing here. If you shoot at 1,000 millimeters in your hand holding, this right here, just moving it that much, is going to look like that on film. An 18 millimeter, I can hold this and hand hold it and shoot, and you're not going to notice much of a difference if I do this. But 1,000 millimeters, it's going to look like I'm doing this with the camera. And if you want proof of that, just go ahead and try to shoot a 1,000 millimeter lens. They are, a lot of them can be extremely expensive depending on what your, notion of extremely expensive is. Last thing, monopods, which it's pretty much like someone came up and Tanya Harding'd your camera, and it has to use a cane. Basically, it's just one long pole. It's just like a tripod, but it's just got one leg, and it's basically just so you can steady your camera and take photos. And that's all it's for. Some places, like there's a few churches, like old monasteries overseas, that they don't allow tripods for whatever reason, so of course you need to ask if you can bring a monopod in there, but it's basically just so you don't have to levitate the camera out in front of you and get this shake. It's basically so you can just set it on the floor and snap your pictures. Well, that about does it for the first tutorial. These are the basics. If you have any questions about cameras, let me know. I've been doing this for a long time. I can probably tell you just about anything you want to know. Again, comments down below. If you like this tutorial or you want more, please hit a like, hit the subscribe button. I will be making more of these tutorials. Oh, and if you're wondering about the branches growing out of my head, which I didn't realize, it makes me look like I have I actually have hair. My wife did this. Yes, she's phenomenal. I don't know why she married me. But anyway, if you like this video and you like what I do here, hit the like button and the subscribe button. Share it, tell your friends. But thank you. Bye.